Shalom, shalom, everybody. Hope you all had a nice break. And we are going to get straight into Yirmeyahu chapter 1 to 2 verse 3. Who's reading? Caroline. Okay.
The words of Yirmeyahu, the son of Hilkiyahu, of the priests who were in Anathoth in the land of Benjamin, to whom the word of Yahweh came in the days of Yoshiyahu, son of Ammon, sovereign of Yehudah, in the 13th year of his reign. And it came in the days of Jehoiakim, son of Yoshiyahu, sovereign of Yehudah, until the end of the 11th year of Tzidkiyahu, son of Yoshiyahu, sovereign of Yehudah, until the exile of Jerusalem in the 5th new moon. Now the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Before I formed you in the belly, I knew you, and before you came out of the womb, I did set you apart. I appointed you a prophet to nations. And said I, Ah, Master Yahweh, see, I do not know how to speak, for I am a youth. And Yahweh said to me, Do not say, I am a youth, but go to all to whom I send you, and speak whatever I command you. Do not fear their faces, for I am with you to deliver you, declares Yahweh. Then Yahweh put forth his hand, and touched my mouth, and Yahweh said to me, See, I have put my words in your mouth. See, I have this day set you over the nations and over the reigns, to root out and to pull down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, What do you see, Yirmeyahu? And I said, I see a branch of an almond tree. And Yahweh said to me, You have seen well, for I am watching over my word to do it. And the word of Yahweh came to me a second time, saying, What do you see? And I said, I see a boiling pot, and it is facing away from the north. And Yahweh said to me, Out of the north evil is set loose on all the inhabitants of the land. For look, I am calling all the clans of the reigns of the north, declares Yahweh. And they shall come, and each one set his throne at the entrance of the gates of Jerusalem, against all its walls all around, and against all the cities of Yehudah. And I shall pronounce my judgments against them concerning all their evil, because they have forsaken me, burnt incense to other mighty ones, and bowed themselves to the works of their own hands. Now gird up your loins and arise, and speak to them all that I command you. Do not break down before their faces, lest I break you before them. For look, I have made you this day a walled city and an iron column, and bronze walls against all the land, against the sovereigns of Judah, against her heads, against her priests, and against the people of the land. And they shall fight against you, but not prevail against you, for I am with you, declares Yahweh, to deliver you. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Go, and you shall cry in the hearing of Jerusalem, saying, Thus said Yahweh, I remember you, the loving commitment of your youth, the love of your bridehood, when you went after me in the wilderness, in a land that was not sown. Israel was set apart to Yahweh, the firstfruits of his increase. All who ate of it became guilty. Evil came upon them, declares Yahweh.
So here we have the introduction to this powerful book of Yirmeyahu. And the words that Yahweh spoke to him were belief-equipping words that called him to a task that took a lot of courage and strength to do. And it's the same message that we see happening in our lives today, where we realize it's so important for us to hear our Master's commission for all of us to stand up, girding ourselves with the truth and proclaiming his good news in everything that we do. And verse 17 obviously is one of the key verses here, where he's told, Gird up your loins now and arise and speak to them everything I command you. I mean, this is exactly how we are equipped to proclaim the Master's truth, when we are standing firm, armed in his truth. If we're not standing in him and armed in his righteousness, we spoke earlier about arming ourselves for the campaign and being in the Torah of Yahweh. If we're not standing armed in the Torah, we cannot proclaim his truth as he commands it. And so when we look at this phrase, gird up your loins and arise, in Hebrew it comes from the words azar, which means to gird or to clothe or equip. And it's a word that's also used metaphorically in Scripture to represent strength. So here was a call that he needs to get strong. And one of the things we see right through Scripture, the call to be strong and courageous, especially to Yehoshua, to Israel, we're called to be strong and courageous and not be discouraged, but stand firm in the Master. And the way that we can be strong and courageous, as we learn from Yehoshua, is that we are to meditate on the Torah day and night, not look left and right, so that we are successful and prosperous in everything that we do. Now, you have azar, then you have mothen, which means loins or back or hips or waist. And kum is to arise or stand. So in Hebrew, the phrase to gird up your loins and arise is tezor mathnecha v'kamta. And so these three words basically are saying, brace yourself for action. You know, gird up your loins. It's time to get ready for action, kind of thing. This was a commissioning call that he was given, and he would not be able to stand up and be ready to take action if he had not been properly equipped in the word. And Yahweh equipped him with his word, and now he was told, and he responded correctly to stand up. You know, when we see in Yirmeyahu, arise, shine, for your light has come. These are all, Yahweh's equipping is the same for all of his people. That we've been given his truth for a purpose of bringing esteem to his name. And while he's appointed some in the body to equip the entire body needs to stand up and proclaim his truth. Everything that we do, everything that we say must be done in his name. And it cannot be done if we are not armed correctly. And the call to stand up and be girded with the truth is one that we are to all be responsive to. We have to be diligent in listening to this command so that we are not falling short of the esteem of Yahweh, but rather that we can be equipped to bring the proper esteem that is to be brought to him, you know. So when we think of this action of girding up one's loins and standing up for the truth, this is where you cannot read this without understanding Shaul's words in Ephesians telling us to put on the whole armor of Elohim and lifting up the shield of belief and standing, and after having done all stand. This is really an equipping theme that Yahweh has given for all of his taught ones and his bride, to be a people that can continually have themselves girded about the waist with truth. Now, having a girdle on is a picture of a belt, and that's where we liken the armor to the belt of truth. That's everything is held together in the truth. We know the Torah is truth. So if you throw away the Torah, you throw away the belt. If you throw away the belt, your clothing is loose. You cannot be effective in guarding the duty as one should. And standing armed with the belt of truth is a militaristic picture of being a trustworthy soldier in the master, dressed in righteousness, guarding his commands. And our master tells us in Lucas 12, verse 35, he says, let your loins be girded and your lamps burning. And the two go, this is a nice picture that he gives us because it goes hand in hand. You know, be girded with the truth can only be accompanied by the Torah, which is a light for our path and a lamp for our feet. And so therefore we must have our lamps burning. And if you're going to have your lamps burning, you need oil in your lamp. So you need to be like wise maidens. Foolish ones don't have oil in their lamps. There's nothing to burn, you know. And so when this command that's given to us to let our loins be girded and our lamps burning, this is the same message that he was giving his taught ones and us today as he was giving to Yirmeyahu back then. And the purpose for that is to stand up against the corruption, stand up against the falling away, the apostasy, the backsliding. And so when we see the power of these words, when it says, you know, let your loins be girded, let your lamps be burning, or your lamps burning, gird up. Right through Scripture, the design of the tabernacle, it's all about keeping the lamp burning, keeping the lampstand trimmed, filled with oil so it shines on the showbread table. It highlights that light is for those in the house. But if we're not coming into the house on the proper appointed times, we don't see the light of the Torah. We're not given insight. The veil still remains because we haven't turned to the Master. So to be properly equipped and armed to take one stand, we have to be keeping his appointments. We have to be keeping his Sabbaths and his feasts. We have to have ears to hear the instructions, just as Yirmeyahu was clearly told to stand up. If he wasn't listening, he would have been destroyed. As Yahweh said, you speak only what I say, and don't be discouraged before them. Don't break down before them, lest I break you. You know? Now, who would you rather be broken by? You know, you don't want to be broken by anybody, but you know what? It's a fearsome thing to fall into the hands of the living Elohim. And so many people fall into the hands of men because they're afraid of men and therefore not willing to stand up for the truth because they back down from speaking the truth because they're afraid of what man can do, and therefore shows that they don't really know what Yahweh will do to those who are disobedient. And so we can see that in our instructions to gird our loins that our master gives, the Greek word that's used for gird is perizonumi, which means to dress in readiness. And the Greek word for loins is osphus, which means the hip, the loin, or girding about, and it refers to the lower region of the back and the hips. And having loins girded is an expression in Greek to be ready for action, ready for anything. If we think even when the master passed over in the 10th plague in Mitzrayim, and the instruction was to be girded, be ready to get out when they needed to get out, And so this is in Shemot 12, verse 11, because we see that same Greek word used in the Septuagint, the perizonumi, there we go. It's from peri, which is about or an account of, and zonumi, it's about being dressed and ready. So it's alert, awake. You can't be ready if you're sleeping. And so Shemot 12, verse 11 says, this is how you eat it, this Pesach meal. Your loins girded and your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Passover of Yahweh. And so we see a powerful picture here. When we look at this instruction given to Yirmeyahu, we can also tie in Acts 4, where we see Kepha being awoken by the messenger and told to get up on his feet and get girded about and get ready, And so we see this readiness that we are to have. And in speaking of Messiah, Yeshayahu says in chapter 11, verse 5, that righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins and trustworthiness the girdle of his waist. So here you see righteousness and trustworthiness. Here you see righteousness and trustworthiness. And so we understand this is a powerful picture that we get, because the word for girdle in Hebrew is ezor, which means a belt, a waistband, a girdle. So we all get that picture of something that ties everything together. And we know that when Yirmeyahu was told to get a girdle and go and bury it in the Euphrates and then go and fetch it again, it was all worn. He said, this is what the house of Israel is. This is what my people are like. They're worn, they're useless, And so we understand that this is a call that we need to hear today about being equipped in the truth. And Yirmeyahu's being called here. He's not even 20 years old. He's a youth. And this is in the days when we think about this, Yirmeyahu means Yahweh has appointed, or Yahweh will rise up, or rise up and appoint. He was the son of Hilkiyahu, which means my portion is Yahweh. And he was one of the priests of Anathoth. Anathoth, don't have a lisp, means answers to prayer. And they were in the land of Binyamin. So these were some of the priests that were living in the land of Binyamin. And this young Yirmeyahu, called by Yahweh to speak the word of Yahweh, and these words, the word that Yahweh gave to Yirmeyahu, it was in the days of Yoshiyahu, son of Ammon, sovereign of Yehuda, and in the 13th of his reign until the exile of Jerusalem in the 5th new moon. Now, when we look at these events, we know that Yoshiyahu, or if you didn't, I'm going to tell you now, was the 15th sovereign of the house of Yehuda. And so the word that came to Yahweh, the word of Yahweh that came to Yirmeyahu was over a span of 40 years. And he stood up from the time of being called in his youth and boldly spoke the word of Yahweh, which got him imprisoned, it got him thrown into pits, it got him rejected, it got him accused of speaking against the people and wanting him to be put to death. And his call to speak the truth lasted the last 5 reigns of the sovereign, from sovereign 15 through to 19. As the 19th sovereign of the house of Yehuda, Tzidkiyahu was the last one that had his eyes taken out after he witnessed his sons being killed by Nebuchadnezzar and then taken to Babylon. And so the example that we learn from Yirmeyahu is that here is one who displays perfect witness for us of trustworthy endurance. Amidst many years of increased depravity, he's the one that wrote Lamentations. He was crying out how terrible the city was when it's supposed to be serving Yahweh. And so most were turning their ears away, in fact, majority of them, from hearing the Torah. And this trustworthy prophet did what Yahweh called him to do, and he did not let circumstances affect his call to speak the truth. He wasn't going to back down, you know. I mean, some of the things he was told to do, like many of the prophets, was really horrible in the eyes of the people that he was speaking to. And in his initial call to stand up, Yahweh made it clear to this young Yirmeyahu that Yahweh knew him before he formed him in the belly. And he identifies himself to this very nervous teenager as the creator of life and calling him to be the bold ambassador. So who better to call you than the one who made you? And what's abundantly clear here, because remember, at that time, people were worshipping everything that the nations were worshipping. They weren't worshipping Yahweh as Elohim, they were calling Baal and everything else, Molech, and whatever other mighty ones were being worshipped. And here Yahweh presents himself and reveals himself to Yirmeyahu. And his initial response is, I can't do this. I'm only a youth. How am I supposed to go speak to these people? Shaul gave Timotheus the same encouragement when he says, let no one look down on your youth, but be an example to the believers in word, in behavior, in love, in spirit, in belief, in cleanliness. In other words, you know what? What's going to make you be capable is when you obey. One thing that we can learn is that in the master, we must never think that we're either too young or too old to speak the truth. We need to realize that when our master calls us, you can do a yuna, you can try and run away. Or you can do what Yirmeyahu did and accept this call. And over a 40-year span is a wonderful lesson on endurance to say, he had to put up with a lot of nonsense, a lot of excuses, a lot of compromises. Everybody thinking we don't want to listen to him, what you're speaking is nonsense. It doesn't go well for us when we do what you tell us to do, Yahweh says, I'm going to send you to these people. And here is a clear witness of Yahweh has commissioned each and every one of us to go and make taught ones of the nations. We're not all appointed to be teachers in the body, but we are all commissioned to go and teach. And we teach by the way we live our lives, by what we say, what we do, how we make sure that people are listening to us, because if we're not keeping our lives clean, how are we supposed to teach people how to be clean? If we're not living set apart, how do we teach people how to be set apart? If we don't distinguish between the clean and the unclean, how can we teach people to do the same? What's happening today is many who are claiming to lead others, it's like the blind leading the blind, because compromise is still a big part of their lives. And so here we see Yirmeyahu being told here, he said, you know what? Now he's a bit nervous. He said, I'm not good enough. And Yahweh says, I knew you already from the womb. I've made you for this, And he says, don't fear their faces because I'm with you. And Yahweh put his hand and touched his mouth. And we see this picture here that here was a guy, he was almost like Moshe. Listen, most of the guys that Yahweh called tended to have some kind of excuse. Moshe had many excuses, 5 excuses to why he wasn't fit to go and call people out of Mitzrayim. I'm reminded of this event where Yahweh touches Yirmeyahu's mouth, of Yeshayahu. When Yeshayahu saw the esteem of Yahweh sitting on the throne, and then he realized, that's in Yeshayahu 6. Now, the first 5 chapters of Yeshayahu highlight the apostasy of Israel and Yehudah, and how terrible they had become, and how Yahweh is sending judgment, and he's going to destroy the wicked. And then he opens Yeshayahu's eyes, and he sees Yahweh seated on the throne, and Yeshayahu then realizes, I'm just as bad as everyone else. And one of the messengers, the cherubim, took a coal from the slaughter place and touched Yeshayahu's lips, and so he was commissioned to go and speak. And this same thing happens here when Yahweh touches Yirmeyahu's mouth, and he gives him then this very clear order, I have put my words in your mouth. You see, when we sit and meditate on the word of Yahweh, his word is being put in our mouths, and it's put in his mouth by his hand, his working of deliverance. We once not able to have access to, now by his blood have access to partake in this word from Bereshit to Chazon. And as we meditate on that word day and night, his word is in our mouths, Devarim says his Torah is in our hearts and in our mouths to do it. So therefore, we're now equipped to be doers of the word. And he says, I've set you over the nations and over the reigns, and this is what you're going to do. And here's a process that we learn, as we see here, to root out, to pull down, to destroy, to overthrow, to build, to plant. See, a lot of people want to plant and build and plant and build, but you can't do that if you don't do what's needed to be done first. And all of these words are quite very aggressive words in terms of words of action. To root out, to pull down, to destroy, to overthrow. These are very descriptive words that if we are not doing these things to take out the wicked practices that cannot be part of our lives, we cannot begin to build. Even in the days of Nehemiah and Ezra, when they were rebuilding the walls, I mean, the guys were saying, yes, this is a lot of work. We have to, so much rubble here. You cannot build on top of junk. So you've got to destroy, overthrow, root out, pull up everything that's been worshipped in falsehood before you can begin to build. And Kepha reminds us that we are living stones built up in the Master to offer up the spiritual slaughter offerings of praise. And therefore, as we are built up in him, we're now equipped to plant. So in our own lives, if we're not pulling up, destroying, overthrowing every stronghold against Messiah, how can we truly say we're being built up in love, in obedience to the Master? And if we only being built up, are we equipped to plant, take seeds and work the harvest, you know? And so we have to understand that when we see this word to be building up or build comes from the word bana, which means to build, to fortify, establish a family, build up. And we understand from this we get the word ben, which is son, because a family is built up with sons and daughters collectively. But another word that we get from bana, which is to build, is the Hebrew word tavnith. Now that should be fresh in your minds. What is tavnith? Pattern. According to the pattern, this is how you build. So Moshe was given the blueprint, so to speak, and you build it according to the pattern. And why I say this is so important for us, because our Master taught us how to pray, not a recital, but part of that teaching us how we pray is that we declare, as it is in the heavens, let it be done here on earth. According to your pattern, it shall be done in our lives. Because when we are building according to his pattern, we can be sure that we are equipped to plant the true seeds of life on hearts that have soils that are ready to receive the word. Now, we can't see the condition of people's hearts, but it shouldn't stop us from being able to plant, you know? And so we need to be like trees planted by the waters so that we can be bearing fruit in and out of season, always ready to give a reason for the hope that we have. And so we see this progression here as a responsibility on all of our lives, being called in the Master to stand up and take a stand for the truth, is that we can never be true builders and planters or being built up and plant if we are not rooting out the junk of depravity and lawlessness, pulling down those high places of hypocrisy. And having been appointed to the task, Yirmeyahu couldn't just sit and go, oh, that was quite a nice word. Wow, oh, that was quite inspiring. No, he had to take action. He was called to rise up and be watchful. And then Yahweh shows him an almond tree and he asks him, Yirmeyahu, what do you see? Well, I see an almond tree. Well, you've seen well. In other words, he's listening. He's focusing. Because the word of Yahweh was in his mouth. He's listening. What do you see? His eyes are focused and he sees correctly. And Yahweh says, I've called you to be a watchman. And here's a play on words, because the root word for almond, shaked, comes from the root which means to watch or to keep watch. The almond tree is known as the watch tree, or the watching tree, if you will, you know. And so we see a powerful witness here that this is what he's called. Yechezkiel too was called to be a watchman. And in that call, that if he did not warn people of their sins and their wrongdoings, their blood would be on his hands. But if you warn people and they're not listening, then that's on them. So we have a responsibility, and this call to watch is something that our Master made abundantly clear to his taught ones. He continually reminds us to be a people that are awake and watching, Couple of verses from Yirmeyahu 24, verse 42 says, "Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour the master is coming." In Yirmeyahu 25, verse 13, "Watch therefore, because you do not know the day nor the hour in which the Son of Adam is coming." And in Yirmeyahu 26, verse 41, "Watch and pray lest you fall into trial. The spirit indeed is eager, but the flesh is weak." This he was saying to three of the taught ones that got to see him being transfigured. And they just kept falling asleep. One of the assemblies in Chazon was clearly told to wake up and strengthen what remains. Watch and repent. If you don't wake up, he's going to come upon you as a thief. Shaul tells the believers in Thessalonica, "About the appointed times I do not need to tell you, but the coming of the lawless one, you've got to watch out for that." You see why he doesn't need to tell us about the appointed times, because as we guard them, we know our master's timing. But in terms of the day or the hour, we know he's coming on Yom Kippur, but we keep watch to the cycles. We also don't know which year that is, because he can cut the days short, but we know when he's coming. So therefore, about the appointed times, we learn that in the obedience to that, we don't need to be told, but we are warned against falling asleep, because the lawless one is coming to lead people away. And to say our master's out there, he's out there. Our master said, when they say that, don't listen to them. We need to, he says in Lucas 21, verse 36, "Watch then at all times and pray that you be counted worthy to escape all this that is about to take place, to stand before the Son of Adam." And so he's given this call now. And then he's told, watch, because this is what I'm doing. And then I'm going to bring discipline from the north. Judgment is coming. The nations, the sovereigns of the north are going to come. They're going to take people into captivity, And so he's going to pronounce judgments against them. And what you've got to tell them, you've got to stand up and speak this truth. You see, most people today just want their ears tickled. They don't want the truth of Yahweh's judgment coming. And judgment begins in the house. So if the house isn't listening to obedience now, then it's going to be on them. But that doesn't mean we don't tell people, hey, why aren't you listening to Moshe? Why aren't you gathering? Can't do your own thing. We must stand up and be strong. The body mustn't be afraid to tell somebody, hey, this is what we need to be doing. Yahweh's judgment's coming. And Yirmeyahu is told this, and he's basically said, if you do break down before them, I'm going to break you. So, he was clearly told there is no other way. And once we've chosen our master's calling on our lives, we realize that there is no other way. There isn't an alternative, Well, there is, but that won't have a good outcome. And so when we see here, he then says, now gird up your loins and arise. This is so powerful for me, And then he's given the greatest encouragement that he could get at this time, trembling youth. Yes, okay, get up, be strong, because they're going to hate you. They're going to fight against you. And it's going to be your own people, your own heads, your own leaders, your own family. They're going to fight against you. But you know what? They're not going to prevail. As long as you're being girded about with the truth, you're going to be victorious. I'm with you, declares Yahweh, to deliver you. You see, when Yahweh says I'm with you, it doesn't mean we won't have to face very tough, challenging times against people that we know. But it's an encouragement to us that he's calling us to be a witness of his judgment that's coming upon those who are not taking a stand, who aren't being righteous. And so we see a wonderful lesson here that Yirmeyahu is given to recognize that this call comes with the reality that you're not going to be liked. So if you are looking for popularity, if you're looking for a big social status, then this isn't where you're going to get it. You're not going to have a great follower count. No, we're talking in today's language. And isn't that what today is all about? The more you get. I was thinking today, yes, we use the platforms to reach people, and Yahweh opens up our territories, and that's how he does it. But I was thinking today how easy it is to follow, unfollow. Friend, no friend. Friend, no friend. It's all just surface level rubbish, actually. Because you know what? You can have so many thousands or followers or whatever. How many of them do you really know personally? You might know one or two of them, sure, but they'll be the ones who will always kind of connect with you. But people who just suddenly follow, don't follow, follow, don't follow, you know what I mean? It just shows this surface level stuff that's going on, making people feel good about themselves. When in actual fact, if you look around at certain social statuses and you see, look at your life. But speak about that compromise, they'll be against you. And this is what Yirmeyahu had to stand up. I mean, he didn't have all the social media platforms of his day, but he had to stand face to face with people and tell them what they were doing is wrong. You have people in the body today, and I say it with great sadness, who are stealing from others and presenting others' works as their own. And then, you know what, it's interesting because we watched some small little clip about, I spoke earlier about AI and the worship. And the problem with AI is that I don't know all the details, I can't remember exactly, but it was about how it grabs information. So if you put information on the net, it's grabbing your information as well, and it can blend everything together and present what's stolen from everywhere as their own. So what you have as your own intellectual property now is suddenly being stolen from you. And this is a problem today because you have many people in the world today that say, oh, well, it's out there for everybody, so it's ours. We had that with our worship a couple of years ago when we saw somebody said it was recorded in Arizona, when we said, no, it's here in South Africa. How do you give our worship music off as your own? And this guy went off on a rant and a rave, and he started saying, it's all Yahweh's. What right do I have to say it's mine? I must prove it. And then I thought, hold on, you're stealing. And then he made a video ranting and raving about a ministry in South Africa that's trying to take them out, and they're persecuting him. He's a liar and a cheat, and he's leading people in the Torah. This is the problem that we have today, when people are actually trying to just get a following, but they're not standing for the truth. And when they don't like what you hear, boy, they're going to be against you. They're going to fight against you. And the only way we know we can overcome is when we stay in the Master. And we spoke earlier about our integrity being intact when we guard his word at all costs, staying armed in the truth. And therefore, when we can speak the truth, we know the words we speak are not corrupt words, but they're seasoned with salt. Did you want to share something? So I think that when we look at this in light of today, this is a living word for us today, for each and every one of us. Are we willing to take a stand? Because the depravity of lawlessness is getting greater and greater and greater. And that amongst the body. Yirmeyahu wasn't told to go to the ites. He's told to go to Yehuda. You know? I mean...
The priests and the kings.
Yes.
Family.
Yeah. And, I mean, I know Caroline's been going through Yirmeyahu. I don't know if she finished Yirmeyahu the last couple of weeks, but she was just saying, she was reading the other day how the men of Anathoth came against Yirmeyahu wanting to kill him. Now, that's where he was from. His own family wanted to kill him. And Yahweh said in this opening chapter, they're going to fight against you, and they're going to come against you. But you know what? They're not going to prevail. And we look at his life, and they didn't prevail. So Yahweh equips us with his word to say, listen, count the cost. I'm calling you. It's not going to be easy, but I'm with you. If you stay in me, you're going to have victory. And this is the encouragement that we must take today. You know, if we think this encouraging call to be armed and in the truth, speak boldly or else is actually an encouragement, because we all need to hear that. Yahweh is saying, listen to my word or else. The or else is not what you want to be on the other side of, you know. And how are we all responding is something that we must all individually be able to answer.
Just here where he says, my word, I'm watching over my word to do it.
Yes.
I mean, we know that whatever he speaks is accomplished.
Yes.
So if you speak it, you know you're speaking the truth, because that is what's going to happen.
Yes.
If you don't, then you're taking away from. And then if you read Echa, which Yirmeyahu wrote after Jerusalem was besieged, he says there, what you have said was going to happen, happened.
Yes.
You know, so that's the thing, is he wants us to not break down, because his word is the thing that's
Yes.
going to be accomplished.
And we must be strong enough to declare his word in its clarity and truth without trying to sugarcoat it or
Leaving bits out.
leaving bits out.
Not the truth.
No.
Yeah.
Because how man will conveniently want to leave bits out because then they can justify their actions. Now, a good and trustworthy soldier of Yeshua Messiah must be willing to stand. And as Shaul says, after having done all, keep standing. And this is basically saying, girded about with the truth, facing the battles of life, even when they're getting tough. In other words, you've got to keep going. It's like, it calls for courage. Our master said, anyone who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for the rain. So this is a picture of endurance. It means you can't give up. There's I'd say a more modern, but it's quite a few centuries ago, but the French Foreign Legion has a motto that states, if I falter, push me on. If I stumble, pick me up. If I retreat, shoot me. So, okay, I don't know how to say it in French, but that's translated, okay? Now, just think about that. It kind of carries a similar boldness of saying, I'm going to fight. That's kind of like their motto. Listen, if I'm going to retreat, you might as well shoot me. But if I fall, pick me up. If I falter, keep pushing me on. And this is what we are to be to each other. We should be encouraging one another, Hebrews 10 verse 38 to 39 says, the righteous shall live by belief. If anyone draws back, my being has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who draw back to destruction, but of belief to the preservation of life. So while the French Foreign Legion might have quite an inspiring motto, we take note that the inspiring examples that we have in Scripture of men and women of belief are enough for us to have the courage to keep standing, to keep going, And when we look at these examples, the Renewed Writings gives us many examples. I mentioned Acts 4. If we think here, Kepha and Yochanan, they weren't part of the French Foreign Legion. They were taught ones of Messiah. And yet they're an example for us of not backing down, They were the ones also imprisoned. And they were let out of prison by the master. They were singing in the prison. So they didn't let the persecution. And then after they were delivered, they were rejoicing the fact that they got persecuted for the sake of Messiah. You see, a lot of people today don't want to take the stand because they don't want to be unpopular, if you will. They don't want to be hated. And one thing that we can be sure of, that when we take a stand in the master, we must expect mixed reviews. Some might like it, most won't like it. So you're going to have mixed reviews. So if you're looking for Google review popularity, then you know what, those polls are not what you're looking for. In fact, you shouldn't be worried about the polls because you should expect mixed reviews. And we should learn to see opposition as an opportunity to witness. And we must let Yahweh do the work through us. It doesn't mean we sit back and do nothing, but we are an ambassador. We stand and should be the light, the presence, the fragrance of our master in every place. We must never compromise, and we must be continually seeking Yahweh to strengthen us with boldness so that we don't break down before the rebellious. We need him and rejoice in the victories that he brings. We read this morning about after everything was tallied up and split up that they went and they saw, but nobody's actually harmed. So sometimes we just need those moments where we take stock of the victory and celebrate it, before heading out into the next battle. So this call here, because Yahweh says, go and cry in the hearing of Jerusalem, because he says, because this is Yahweh, he says, I remember your loving commitment in the wilderness. When you went after me in the wilderness, where you wanted to hear my voice. What happened now? Israel don't want to hear his voice anymore. They want to hear the voice of the nations. Israel was set apart to Yahweh, and they were the first fruits of his increase. But every one of them who ate of his provision actually became guilty. And so then he proceeds with all the words that he would have to speak against them. You see, Yahweh remembers that we are flesh, but that doesn't give us a license to operate in the flesh. Knowing that, he's saying, I'm actually calling you out. And this is a compassion that he shows. This notion that, he's just so cruel in the Old Testament, he just destroys. Actually, you see so much compassion and loving commitment to his covenant. And when we realize how much he loves us, and he loves us spontaneously. He's calling us to reciprocate that action, and how he calls us to that is to stand up, be armed in the truth, and speak his truth without compromise. And this is what we've been called to do. We're going to read Yirmeyahu first and then Philippians. It's Yirmeyahu 5, verse 33 to, is it? Okay, so it's just what we've already spoken about earlier today, but it's nice to go through the readings and tie it in with the Torah. So who's reading there? Okay.
Again you heard that it was said to those of old, You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to Yahweh. But I say to you, do not swear vainly at all, neither by the heaven, because it is Elohim's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great sovereign. Nor swear by your head, because you are not able to make one hair white or black. But let your word yes be yes, and your no be no. And what goes beyond these is from the wicked one.
I think we can go straight. Who wants to read Philippians? And we can talk about this a little bit more, but we've discussed it. Philippians
3:12-16.
Not that I have already received or already been perfected, but I press on to lay hold of that for which Messiah Yeshua has also laid hold of me. Brothers, I do not count myself to have laid hold of it yet, but only this, forgetting what is behind and reaching out for what lies ahead. I press on toward the goal for the prize of the high calling of Elohim in Messiah Yeshua. As many then as are perfect should have this mind, and if you think differently in any respect, Elohim shall also reveal this to you. But to what we have already attained, walk by the same rule, be of the same mind.
Not that I have already received, already been perfected. Shaul was saying, listen, don't stop now. I'm not stopping now. This is a call to keep going. You know, the Greek word that's translated press on is dioko, which means to put to flight, to pursue, even means to persecute. And it carries the meaning to follow after or to run swiftly in order to catch a person or thing. Or it also has the idea of earnestly endeavoring to acquire. But it also has the meaning to suffer persecution. So here we see in this pressing on, it's the desire that he's going forward to, but it comes with hardships, but he's not stopping. Dioko is translated as persecuted in 2 Timothy 3 verse 12, and it says, indeed, all those wishing to live reverently in Messiah shall be persecuted. It's not maybe, you shall be persecuted. And it's also translated as pursue in Hebrews 12 verse 14, when it says, pursue peace with all and pursue a partners, without which no one shall see the master. So we see from this word dioko that when we earnestly endeavor to attain a clear standard of set apartness, complete set apartness, we're going to be persecuted. It's kind of a given. It's going to come with comments, slander, maybe more verbal abuse, or you know what, sometimes even just a look is kind of even, or not even, sometimes people just flatly ignore you. That's also a form of persecution. And we are reminded not to be discouraged by this. The pursuing a partners that brings on persecution brings a question that we all should be able to answer is, will I obey the Torah of the house? And we know from Yechezkiel, the Torah of the house is set apartness. You know, Tehillah 119, the psalmist wrote in verse 29 to 33, remove from me the way of falsehood, favor me with your Torah. I have chosen the way of truth. Your right rulings I have held level. I have clung to your witnesses. O Yahweh, do not put me to shame. I run the way of your commands, for you enlarge my heart. Teach me, O Yahweh, the way of your laws, and I observe it to the end. How fit are you in your pursuit of apartness? Are you running in the way of the commands of Elohim? Or is it like getting on a treadmill and after half a minute it's like, I can't do this. But it might start like that at the beginning. But maybe in a couple of months' time, you're doing 30 minutes, maybe 40. And it's like, wow, I can do this. But that's the pressing on, the example that we can use in pressing on in the Master. When we start to take a stand in the Master, it feels like being on that treadmill that you've never been on before. But you don't stop and give up. You press on and you get exercising in what will give you the ability to have more breath in your lungs and endure, so to speak. The Hebrew word for run in Tehillah 119 is rutz. It means to run with speed, to perform an action with a special focus, that it's done in an urgent manner. So it's not something that you say, I'll get to it. Yeah, I know we're supposed to, but that's not rutz. Okay? And when we look at Shaul giving his encouraging words to the believers in Philippi, we're reminded that we've not arrived yet, so to speak. We're all running this race. We can't sit by waiting for better days. We got to be persistent in our zealous pursuit of set apartness. The last couple of weeks, we've been reminded of the zeal of Pinchas. We looked to Yirmeyahu. We're now looking here at the example that was given by Moshe to the leaders in Gad and Reuben. Yehoshua and Caleb were the only ones of that generation that followed completely. And so we must run because the goal that's set before us, the Hebrew word or the Greek word for goal is skopos. It's almost like you've got to skopos it into the goal. I don't know. But skopos means a mark on which to fix the eyes upon, to look carefully and consider. And it also is understood as the distant mark that's looked at. It's almost like, yes, it sometimes feels like it's far away, but don't take your eye off it. It's used in the renewed writings only here in this letter that Shaul is writing to the believers in Philippi, reminding us, as we see in the book of Hebrews, to fix our eyes on the Prince and Perfecter of our belief. We are to be looking at our Master, and he is the goal of our belief. It denotes a character of being disciplined, because when you're focused on something, if something's in a distance, how many of you have listen, I hope you are learning and training yourselves each month, because none of us have fully arrived. And when we're looking for the new moon at the beginning of the month, we're all over the place. Sometimes, because last month it was there, maybe it's there now. And, and sometimes you look and you look and you look and your eyes deceive you. You think, did I see it? Oh, no, it didn't. But you keep looking. And then you take your eyes away from it and you go, oh, where was it again? No, because when you focus on something, you don't take your eye off, because you can then lose it, especially with the idea of skopos being in a distance, So a derivative of skopos is skopio, which means to look at or keep watch. And this is in Luke 11, verse 35, where our Master is translated as see to it. Therefore, that the light that is in you is not darkness. So in other words, contemplate and keep your eyes on what matters the most, so that the light that's in you doesn't end up being revealed as darkness. Because we know light in Hebrew carries the idea of understanding and clarity, revelation, where darkness is obscurity, ignorance, lack of knowledge. And there are a lot of people who think they have the light, but it's actually darkness inside of them, because their eyes are not on the prize. And so when he says here, when he says there's a prize, that Greek word for prize is brabeon. Brabeon means the reward or award that's given to a victor in a game, the prize, the medal, the honor. And then metaphorically, it's used to describe our reward that's in the heavens. Because Shaul also writes, we're competing not for a crown that rusts and, and fades away. We're competing for the crown of life. And so we understand that this root word brabeon is only used twice in the renewed writings, here in the letter to the Philippians, and once in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 24 to 25, when it says, do you not know that those who run in a race indeed all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way so as to obtain it. And everyone who competes controls himself in every way. Now they do it to receive a corruptible crown, but we for an incorruptible crown. So by now we can see a clear theme in the renewed writings that highlights the call that Yirmeyahu was given to endure. Pressing on to the goal of the high calling or the prize of the high calling of Elohim in Messiah Yeshua is something that can only be done with proper zeal and urgency. Being watchful, sober, alert, awake, so as not to be led astray by deceptive heresies and falsified dogmas of man, corrupted assimilation of teachings that sound true, but to the trained ear will be proven false, but to those who are having their ears tickled cannot identify it. Now, the Greek word that's translated as high is ano, which means high, above, upward, or brim. And in the renewed writings, it's used used of heaven in both material and spiritual sense, highlighting how we are to lift our eyes above to the Master, lift our eyes up. And Shaul writes in Colossians 3 that if we were raised with Messiah, seek the matters which are above, which are up. That's the metaphoric image that he's given us. Where Messiah is seated at the right hand of Elohim, mind the matters above and not those of the earth. In other words, we need to be focusing on Yahweh's ways and not on man's ways, because the wisdom of man is folly with Elohim. Now, when we are to mind the matters above, that Greek word for mind is phroneo, which means to have understanding, to think, to set your mind, comes from the root word phren, which is midriff, heart, thought, thinking. In other words, if you're not meditating, this is the idea that's flowing from Hebrew into the Greek. If we're not meditating on the matters above, which is the Torah of Yahweh, because it comes from above, then we're not going to be running the race correctly. We won't be pressing on to this high calling. Now, this high calling is such a wonderful thing that Shaul is reminding us that we all have. You know, the Greek word that's translated as calling is klesis. Now, klesis means a calling or a condition or a calling or an invitation. And it comes from the word kaleo, which means to summons, to call out. And from kaleo, we get the Greek word ecclesia, which is the assembly. It's the called out ones, you know, coming from ek, which is from or out of, and kaleo, which is invited. So it's out of the invitation, so the people come. When our Master gives the parable of the wedding feast and calling people, the true ecclesia come, where those who aren't the true ecclesia make excuses. We've been called to such an honorable position of excellence in the Master, which we can only respond to as we grow in the knowledge of him. And we can only do that when we are responding to the call to gather. Our Master made it clear that through Shaul that the gifts and the calling of Elohim are not to be repented of. We were also told in 1 Corinthians 1, look at your calling, brothers, that there were not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble. And in Corinthians 7 verse 20, let each one remain in the same calling in which he is called. We get this theme through Ephesians, the expectation of his calling. We are to walk worthily of his calling. So we see this word of calling is identified right through his letters to remind us that we have this expectation of this prize, this calling that we've been called to as a set-apart bride. And when we reject our ears to hear that calling, it's seen in a lack of obedience in proper Sabbath observance, proper observance to the commands of Elohim, showing that you don't really have ears to hear. But we who have ears to hear, we are called out ones, responding to the Master's clear call to wake up, be watchful, be alert, and realize this gift that we've been given by the Master. And so when we realize that we've escaped the world, as Kepha writes to us in his second letter, we've escaped the corruption in the world that's been caused by lust. Because when men lusted after the things of the flesh, it brought the corruption in the world, but our Master's delivered us from that. We've escaped that. Are we living lives that truly have escaped that? Are we living lives that show that we are pursuing apartness? Just want to see here, Renee's saying, so not calling like specific purpose. On WhatsApp, it popped up on my screen on WhatsApp. So not calling like specific purpose, but instead calling to live set apart. Well, it carries the both, because that is our specific purpose, to live set apart, you know. But it is also used when inviting and calling people. The same word is used, but we understand this calling that we've received is the high calling in Messiah is set apartness. And we realize that this calling to set apartness is one that our Master wants us to have ears to hear, because we've been called to freedom. And we understand this freedom that we've been called to. We see that where Yahweh is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of Yahweh is, there is freedom. So when we walk in the Spirit, we're walking in Yahweh. When we walk according to the Spirit, we're walking according to His Torah. It's a Torah of freedom. So we see that the called out ones are called out to a high calling of walking in obedience to the Torah to possess the witness of Yeshua Messiah. He that looked into the perfect Torah, that of freedom, not becoming a hearer that forgets, but a doer of work, this one shall be blessed in his doing of the Torah. This is something that we can take courage in. And when Shaul is reminding us of this high calling that we have, and as Renee is saying here, it is a calling to set apartness. That is the desire of Elohim, that we should know how to possess our own vessel. And when you know how to possess your own vessel in set apartness, but not in lust like the nations who do not know Elohim, we can realize that He didn't call us, Thessalonians says He didn't call us to uncleanness, but in set apartness. So I hope that answers your question. So we realize the responsibility that we have as we've looked at Yirmeyahu and his call to gird up. We look here in Shaul reminding the believers in Philippi. I mean, this whole letter is all helping us understand a mindset. I've mentioned in the past a summary of each chapter. The first one highlights us being single-focused, not being double-minded, but being focused on the Master. Chapter 2 goes more into, Messiah being our example of submission. So having a mind that doesn't resist listening to the instructions, but submits to the authority of a Master. This third chapter that we've looked at, part of, highlights the spiritual mind. Messiah is the goal, where we are thinking of the matters above, tying in with his letter to the Colossians. And chapter 4 highlights the secure mind. Our identity in the Master is secure. We know who we are. So therefore, we can stand up and not be afraid of the persecution. So we tie up all these things here. We realize that if we are not pursuing apartness, if we're not running the race with endurance, then we are actually, whatever we're doing is in vain. We are to pursue the matters of peace, as Shaul writes in Romans 14, and the matters for building up one another. Set apartness is what befits his house, and we need to take this message and let it be a reminder to us to keep pressing on. I don't know, I've said it a couple of years ago, I'm sure I've said it a number of times, but it's because every time it comes into my mind, whenever I read this letter with pressing on, I come from a bit of a catering background for a number of years before we went into ministry in the hospitality industry, but I always get this picture of a long conical strainer, and when we're doing bulk production, and you take these boiled potatoes, and you want to mash them, but you want it now fine, you don't want little lumps in, you got to press it through that strainer, and you got to press, and it's like coming out, so the junk's left behind. Now that's the kind of a picture I get of pressing on. It's not easy, but you know what? We need to press on. We're going to face some tough things, but we're going to come through refined as long as we press on. And so I'm not saying we like little bits of potatoes, but it's just that image of pressing on. It because it takes effort. That's the idea that I get. That image of it takes effort, and you got to, especially if you want to get it really fine, you got to push through, And this is the idea of it's not easy. And our Master never said it was easy, but he said, "Take courage because I've overcome the world." And when Yirmeyahu was encouraged by the Master that he is with him, that he should not be discouraged, he's with him. They're going to fight against you, but they're not going to prevail. This is where our belief is in question. Do we truly believe the word of our Master? As Karlin highlighted, Yirmeyahu writing the book of Lamentations or Echa, and actually writing there after everything that happened, everything you said came to pass. So we can bank on Yahweh's word. And that's in every aspect. Do we truly believe his word so as to stand up, be girded about the belt of truth, and always ready to give a reason for the hope we have as we fix our eyes on our Master? Any thoughts on today's readings? Coming back to our words, I know we read quickly through Yirmeyahu 5 because we did discuss it during the Torah readings. And let your yes be yes, let your no be no. Don't swear falsely. We've all, listening together today, and those that are listening later, I mean, people that haven't made the good confession are probably not going to be listening to any of these teachings anyway. So we're all sitting here and we know that we've all made the good confession. And if anybody is hearing this by some reason they've never made the confession, you want to learn how to do that, we'll gladly assist you in that. And it's a confession of commitment that never stops. That's the key here. There is a falling away when Yirmeyahu was told by Yahweh, this is what's going to happen. And later he wrote, it happened. When Yahweh says there's a falling away coming, it's going to happen. It's already happening, and it will continue to happen until our master comes. But that should give us the courage and the strength to not shrink back, but to press on. Because we have this high calling in Messiah to be made complete. And how sad it would be if you ran a few laps and gave up. So that's our readings for today. Anybody else would like to share any comments? Anybody here? Guys, want to share anything? Stand out for you today? Any encouragements? There's a few people online with us. I don't know if anybody would like to share anything, you're welcome to do so. I hope that all of these words are encouraging words to you, not frightening words. I mean, it can be a bit frightening because it's a bit daunting sometimes to sit back and calculate and recognize actually what we've been called to. And sometimes it's a bit of a wake-up call when our master says, watch, because if we don't watch our own lives to God's set apartness, we can find ourselves, we might be physically awake, but we are asleep to the truth, and we just carry on with emotions and not recognizing that compromise can have a way of creeping in if we're not guarding ourselves and guarding each other and building one another up. Okay, so that's our readings for today. May you all be encouraged to keep pressing on and keep pursuing set apartness, because we all want to see the Master, that's for sure. I'm sure we all do. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here together. Let's do it with great joy and gladness of heart. And let us be ready to give an answer for the hope that we have, but also be ready to stand up against that which needs to be destroyed. And not break down before people's faces because they give you an ugly look when you're speaking the truth. And snatch people from the fire, hopefully winning some. Because the goal of our lives is the goal of our belief is the deliverance of lives. Yeah. On that note, let's pray. I don't see my mouse here. There we go. Master Yahweh, we bless you and we thank you that we can sit together in your word and be encouraged once again and be reminded of this equipping call that you have given each and every one of us. Just as you gave to a very brave Yirmeyahu, at first very tender Yirmeyahu, who is a great example of courage and bravery that we need to follow that example of, and many others that you give to us in Scripture, listing many of them and some unnamed ones, giving us a clear pattern that is the same for every set apart one in Messiah. I pray that you give us all that we need to keep serving you, and that we can throw off everything that hinders our ability to stand firm in you, that we can be clothed correctly from on high, armed in the complete truth of your word, that we can have a mind that is completely secure in you as we guard your word with all our hearts and our minds. And we thank you that we can be blessed in meditating on your word that sets us free and run in this Torah of freedom with great joy and exaltation of your mighty and wondrous name. We all want to press on to this high calling. And we pray you continue to strengthen us from on high to do so without hindrance, that we can have this joy and expectation of meeting you face to face, made complete when you soon return. And help us to build one another up. And I pray that you add to many who want to be built up as we do, and building each other up in the most set-apart belief. May we continue to esteem and praise you and keep our lives free from those snares that try to trip us up. We bless and praise you in the wondrous, the mighty and esteemed name of Yahushua our Messiah. Amen and amen.